Hi, I'm Iain Grysak, and today we're going to take a look at dropbacks, and specifically how to know if one is actually ready to start working on dropbacks. So it's a good question. I've seen a lot of people who really aren't ready to work on dropbacks, and if one starts to do that prematurely, if the prerequisites haven't been developed and they do start, with the help of a teacher even trying to go up and down, it can certainly cause problems, compression and pain. So it's really important that the prerequisites are developed in the body first before one starts to attempt dropping back. So one of the unique things about the Ashtanga system, I feel, is that we are always trying to develop both strength and mobility or flexibility equally. And you see this all along through the whole practice. Again, that's a big part of what the whole vinyasa concept is about. Even if you do a posture that requires a lot of mobility or flexibility, we always, take the vinyasa, lift up, jump back, jump through, to develop the strength from the inside to support that flexibility. As you move on in the system, especially getting beyond the primary series and into the intermediate and advanced series, you start to come across postures and movements where you require both strength and flexibility within that posture, within that movement. And I think dropbacks are a really good example of that. So those are two of the prerequisites to work on a dropback, is that you need to have both mobility and strength and flexibility to start working with the dropback. So let's take the flexibility or mobility part of it first. When we're doing a backbend, there's two parts of the body that need to have some mobility, where people tend to be tied in one or the other or both. So one is in the hips, so one sort of has to be able to extend well from here to here. So that involves, whether there's tightness or mobility in the psoas and then also in the quads. So both of those, big muscles need to be open so that the hips, and the belly can extend properly. And then the second place where people tend to be tight is in the chest and the shoulders. For standing up from a backbend and dropping back, the hips are actually need to be a little more open than the shoulders and the chest, although the shoulders and the chest do need to be open as well. Let's take a look on Susan. So we'll see what it looks like, maybe if things aren't quite open enough. So go ahead. So if the hips aren't open enough, usually what you see is this kind of long back bend. Yeah, so let's do that. Yeah, so you see this sometimes, so I call this the tabletop back bend, where it looks a little bit like a table. It's because she's not getting enough lift through here. So, if I said, okay, Susan, let's start working on dropbacks, and I tried to pull her up, what would probably happen, again, you can see gravity is just going to be pulling her down, right? So if I start to lift her up, because she's so long, the effect of gravity pulling her back down is going to be quite strong, and she's going to end up compressing somewhere in here. Even with my help, she's probably going to compress there. And on her own, there's absolutely no hope of her being able to stand up from this position. So then if she lifts the hips a little bit more, then she starts to get more movement here, and then she can actually walk in. So to me, that's a prerequisite. What should have to happen is the hips lift up, and then the hands walk in. And then she should be able to straighten her arms. So I see some people with their elbows bent. Bend your elbows. So they're bent, and they actually can't extend their shoulders any more than that. So again, if I try to pull them up from that position, it's again going to compress in the lower back. So two things: hips have to lift. She has to be able to walk in at least once or twice. And then once she walks in, she has to be able to fully straighten her arms and get that extension through the shoulders. Now she's ready to try dropbacks. So second thing that's required is strength. Right? So again, somebody might have the mobility or the flexibility, but they don't have the strength to support the lift up and the drop back. So there needs to be a lot of strength in the deeper abdominal muscles, so the transverse abdominis, especially the lower part of the transverse abdominis. And there needs to be a lot of strength in the legs, because what's going to happen to stand up from a drop back, it's just like samastitihi, right? So when we're in samastitihi, we're pressing down into the ground, so the pelvic bones are dropping down, the bones of the legs and the feet are dropping down, and that creates a lift through here. So this is the manifestation of Mula Bandha, right? The dropping down of the pelvic bones, which creates the lift of the rib cage and the spine. So when you're standing up, it's the same thing. There has to be that strength from inside here and in the legs to bring more weight onto the feet, and then that presses down into the ground, and that's what actually lifts the spine up into the samastitihi position. Let's take a look at it. Go ahead, give it a try. Yeah, we'll stand up. I'll help you. So again, she lifts up, she gets the lift in her hips, she walks in. Now this is a good position. So what a lot of people do, again, instead of using that strength, is they might have the flexibility, but then they don't know how to harness the internal strength to lift themselves up, and they just start to rock and fling themselves up. So that's usually when you're learning, that's going to happen a little bit, but what I like to do when I'm helping people to learn is teach them how to use the legs more. So when I assist drop backs, I always do it in this position. If I'm standing up, I'm always going to be doing a lot more of the work, and they're not going to be doing the legs. If I'm sitting down to help somebody, it makes them work a lot more in the legs, and to me that's again a qualification. So what I usually do is, if I'm not sure, I'll hold them here first at the top of the glutes and around the sacrum, and I'll get her to lift up onto her fingertips, and then I'll just give a little bit of help, and then I'll see if I can feel her pulling, and then if I feel she's got it, I'll let go. Going back, the same thing. So I'm just going to support her here. And so as she goes back, I'm going to ask her to stay on her legs for as long as possible. So usually I say keep your legs straight and press down into the earth with your feet and start to move the hips forward. So you're basically supporting the movement as much as you can with your own legs and getting as much arch that way. So go ahead, you can do it slowly. So again, she's moving the hips forward. She's holding herself up. And then I'll say, now still hold yourself up and start to take the hands over. She's still holding herself. And then if I'm not sure, I'll just give her a little bit of support as she drops back. And then same thing coming up. Now if I feel she's really got it down with me helping her there, I'll take it to the next level and I'll hold her here. So now she has to work even more. I'll again lift on the fingers. I just give her a bit of a pull, and as soon as I feel she's got it, I let go, and I'll say, pull, pull. And that's it. So she has to really harness that pulling action from deep inside her belly to get into her legs and then come up the rest of the way. Same thing going back. So again, now I can also hold her feet down with my feet, and again I'll support her here so she can start to go back. So first I don't hold her at all. I want to see how far she can go on her own. Start to give her the confidence that she's actually holding herself up. And then again, once she's got maximum arch there, again, knees have to really be extending. And maybe just a little bit of help. And then same thing coming up. So inhaling, she comes to her fingers. I give her a little bit of pull. Yeah. And then the last step, we'll see if she can do it by herself. Again, look how much strength there is in the legs. She's holding herself up, the hips are extending, the legs are strong, and she's got everything she needs now to do it on her own. And same thing coming up. Just a little bit of help. Of course, I wasn't stepping on her feet. She could have turned them out and come all the way up. But again, that's a little bit of extra work in the legs to keep the feet turned in. So that's basically how we work on the drop backs and develop the ability to stand up and come down. Another important thing is that, again, it's the standing up that's actually a prerequisite for dropping back. It's easier to drop back from standing than it is to stand up, but again, to stand up really requires developing that strength a lot more to pull yourself up. And then once you have that strength to pull yourself up into a standing position, then you already can harness that strength when you go back, right? So I don't recommend people try to drop back first and then learn to stand up. Even though that's the easier way, it requires less strength, and there is then going to be more chance of compressing in the back and creating some pain or an injury. So coming up to me is actually a prerequisite for dropping back. So if your hips and your shoulders and your chest aren't open enough to start drop back, so let's take a look at how you can work towards developing those prerequisites. So again, to get the lift in the hips, one nice thing is, if somebody just kind of comes and presses on the ASIS, these two bones here, that gives you something to push up again. So that really develops, and you discover how to work in the legs to start lifting this up. And I can feel her pressing up into my hands, so she's actually working that now. So now this can lift. So over time, first, you can have somebody do that so you can get a feeling for it. And then once you realize that's the work you have to do, you can start to work on it. So then once she lifts the hips, she can walk in a little bit. Now if the shoulders aren't open enough, the shoulders and the chest, again, come this way. Right, so let's say this isn't happening. So what she needs to do to work on this is bring her weight more into her hands, try to push down the base of the thumb and the first finger, and then really access the lift here. So the more she comes this way and then engages with the earth, the more the earth is going to support that lifting up of her chest. So she can work between the two patterns. She can work on lifting the hips up, and once the hips are lifted and she walks in, she can work on bringing her weight more to the hands, again pressing down and lifting through the chest. So working in the posture, those are the two ways to work on both the hips and the shoulders and the chest. But sometimes it can be helpful. So say you've got, maybe you've got through primary series, you can do all that forward bending and twisting and all the aponic stuff, but the back bend is still really tight. There's a few extra things you can do to try to prepare for it. One thing is you can start by working an upward dog. So I see a lot of people, they're kind of rushing through the practice, and maybe they are tight in the back bend, so upward dog feels kind of unpleasant, and so they don't get a full expression of upward dog. What I really recommend is just kind of slowing down the upward dog vinyasa. I mean, all the vinyasa movements I feel are very important. You should really try to take a full, deep, slow breath as you're going through the vinyasa movements, especially chaturanga and especially upward dog, the two vinyasas that people tend to rush through, and try to get the full expression of those poses. Let's take a look at upward dog. So in upward dog, the idea is to get as much dropping here as possible. And again, this is what prepares that extension in the hips. So the idea is, you're almost as if there's a weight here and you're just letting that drop down. The thighs keep lifting up, but again, you're trying to relax the psoas and allow it to lengthen. And so as much as possible, getting that action in every upward dog. And then in the chest, again, the idea is using the hands. The hands are it's as if they're trying to drag back on the mat. And that's what pulls the chest up and forward. So again, this is going down, and this is going up and forward. So you have so many opportunities before you get to backbends to work on those two movements in the upward dog. So again, that's within the context of the Ashtanga practice. Now there are a few other sort of openers you can do. One thing I don't recommend is stopping your Ashtanga practice and doing passive openers in the middle of your practice. I feel, again, that keeping that internal movement of breath and bandha is very, very important to develop the deeper qualities of the Ashtanga practice. And if you stop and do some passive opener for 5 minutes or whatever before you do another posture, it kind of breaks up that continuity of the internal bandha pattern that you're trying to develop. Not that openers don't have their place, but I think that they should be done kind of before you start your practice. So that's what I recommend for people who need a bit of extra opening. So say before your sun salutations, you can do these openers. So if we're working on getting more opening here, Supta Virasana is a really good posture. You can do this anytime. It's actually very good for digestion. You can even do it on a full stomach, later in the day. Go ahead. Supta Virasana. So again, this really lengthens, both the quads and the psoas muscle. So I don't ever recommend being completely passive, even in the openers. So this concept of yin yoga, where I think you're just supposed to relax completely. Again, I think you should always keep some ujjayi breathing and some internal strength happening. So if she presses down with her feet and kind of lifts up through here, and of course she's tucking, she's drawing the tailbone this way, and then she's actually moving the back of her heart in the other direction. So that keeps as much length and engaging through the center of the body, so that, again, the deeper internal muscles are actually active. And if she keeps her ujjayi breathing, that's going to ensure that there's some, action in the deeper core muscles of the body. I would say usually something like this, stay 25 slow breaths. If you have more time, you could stay longer, but to me that's a good minimum for an opener. So if that's comfortable and you want to take it a bit further, you can do Urdhva Dhanurasana. So if she keeps this leg in Supta Virasana and then just takes that leg out and draws the knee up towards her chest. So this gives even more stretch, to the quad and the psoas. You can see her knees lifting up because it's actually a little more demanding of a stretch. So only if the two-leg one is quite comfortable, for you, and then you feel, okay, I need something more, then you can try this one. So again, putting more length into this left side of her body, and then of course you have to change the leg and do the other side. And again, you may find one side is easier than the other, which shows most people have a left-right imbalance somewhere. And again, stretching that arm will again just access getting a little more lengthening from here. If you leave the arm passive, you won't get as much length. But she feels as if she's trying to reach her fingers out of the back of her belly. That helps to get even more stretching of the psoas. Okay. And then the other thing that's really good for the hips and the psoas and the quads is the lunge on the wall. So usually it's not a bad idea to have some cushioning. So again, the knee goes right against the wall. So she's actually pushing that back foot into the wall, so she's pressing here. And I like to keep the hands here because, again, you want to get that lifting action, right? You don't just want to be sagging into it. It's good. As you stay for some breaths, you can go even more forward and go deeper into the lunge. But then, as much as you go forward, you should be pressing here to get that lifting. Again, Mula Bandha needs to be there. And Mula Bandha is that lifting of the rib cage out of the pelvis. That protects the... So you're not compressing in the lower back. You're getting that internal action of the deeper abdominal muscles to support the lengthening. Again, 20-25 breaths on each side is a good time to stay. And again, using the ujjayi breathing to help ensure that that inner engaging is happening. You can do the other side. Getting a little more into the shoulder extension, so opening up this part. This is a nice opener, and again, you can use a chair or you can do it standing up. If you have a ledge that's about the right height, you can do it, just in a standing forward bend. But again, the idea is you've got a belt that's about shoulder width. It usually goes just above the elbows. And so the idea is we're trying to get an external rotation of the shoulders. So she's pushing down with the elbows. She's pushing into the block with this part of her hand. And then as she presses into the block, she tries to spread her shoulders away from each other and to get the humerus into this kind of a movement. So the more that happens, the more the shoulder blades come out to the side, and then they draw down into the back. So from here, she's trying to engage the lats to try to help pull the shoulder blades down this way, and then the bottom tip of the shoulder blade tries to sink into the body. So this helps you to access more of that movement. Okay, that's good. Come out. So again, the belt should go right about here. And then it should be about shoulder width. This is good. You can adjust it, to whatever width feels better for your body. The next one's a little more complex to get into. Take a look at it. Usually you need a helper to get into it, but eventually you can learn how to do it on your own. You want one block or two blocks?
Just one.
So again, the block should go wherever you feel the tightest, somewhere around, the mid-thoracic, bottom of the shoulder blades. And so you start. Again, belt is about the same as it was for the last one. And she starts by holding the block, and then she gets it into place, gets comfortable there. And then she can put the belt on. So the belt goes in the same place, just above the elbow. And the idea is that the neck should be supported. So the belt has to loop, just around the base of her skull so that she can actually lie on the belt like a pillow. And then the last step is she can take a block between her hands and then just allow the block to pull you down. Once you can touch the ground, you can kind of walk the hands in. And again, this does the same thing as the last one, but you're more in a back bend in this one, so it's a little more intense. You can again stay, I would say, at least 25 deep breaths. Okay, and then coming out, she can drop the block, and the idea is to kind of come up chest first. And let go of the belt and come out of the pose. And so the passive openers can be good to lengthen muscles that are tight, but again, one disadvantage of passive openers is it doesn't require the engaging that the postures require. So when you're opening in the posture, there's always some part of the body that has to be strongly engaged. And that engaging will support the lengthening of whatever muscles are tight. So passive openers, unfortunately, don't teach you that. So I've seen a lot of people who do passive openers for long periods of time, and then nothing changes in the posture. And again, that's because they're not learning how to engage the body in the posture to support the passive openers. So they can be useful, but again, one has to also learn how to engage, to support that opening from within the structure of the posture itself.